Did you know that there's just over 6,000 US citizens who went to go fight for Canada in the Second World War before the United States even joined? And 17 of those individuals are buried here. When you come to a place like this here, the Commonwealth War Graves in Dürnbach, Germany, you come thinking about death. But when you leave a place like this, you're thinking about life, about their lives and their sacrifices. In today's video, we're going to cover the story of 4 different individuals who gave the ultimate sacrifice, who gave their tomorrow for our today. So why were Americans joining Canada to fight in the war? Well, Canada joined in 1939. The United States did not join until December of 1941. Most of these individuals never made headlines, but they felt that they needed to do their part to stop the tyranny that was going on in Europe. Today, I want to tell the story of these 4 men. They come from Detroit, from New York, Minnesota, and San Francisco. They got into bombers, and they now lay here with those whom they served with, here at their final resting places in Dürnbach War Cemetery in Germany. So during my first visit here at Dürnbach, the groundskeeper gave me a list of individuals who are buried here from the United States. And it was upon this list that gave me the interest to look into it a little bit more. The first individual is Flight Sergeant William Joseph Valkenier. And we're going to go to his grave first to tell his story. So Valkenier was actually born in Canada, in Wallaceburg, Ontario, on May 1919. And it was later when he and his family moved to Detroit, Michigan. So when the war began, he joined up with the Royal Canadian Air Force and became a wireless operator and air gunner with the 419th Moose Squadron. However, on the 6th of May, 1942, he took off from Royal Air Force Base Mindenhall in a Wellington Mark III and never returned from that mission. See, he was flying over probably near Mannheim when he was shot down. The intended target was Stuttgart. So I can only speculate as to the reasons why Valkenier left the United States to go fight for the country of his birth. But whatever motivation he had, it meant a lot to him. And his sacrifice and his story needs to be remembered. His headstone reads, "There is no greater love or sacrifice as those who give their lives for their friends." And those are words to be remembered. If you've been watching the videos on my channel, you know this isn't the first time I've come to this cemetery here in Dürnbach. And I have to say, I'm just as taken back and in awe of the sacrifice of each individual here. And I wish I could cover every one of their stories. Unfortunately, I don't have the time to do so. But if you're interested in getting a broader scope or broader picture of the cemetery and some of the stories I told last time, make sure to check out that video. So the next individual is also from the 419th Moose Squadron. This is James Arthur Stutter, a native of Minnesota and New York, and this is his story. Flying Officer James Stutter was born on the 15th of July, 1920 in Minnesota. His Royal Canadian Air Force and squadron sources also connect him with New York City later in life, but his official home of record is still Minnesota. He joined the Royal Canadian Air Force and trained as a pilot and was posted to the 419th Moose Squadron. Stutter flew a Halifax with the nickname of Happy Valley Sally. On the night between the 5th and 6th of September in 1943, he took off from Milton, St. George for a raid on Mannheim. It was a large bomber command operation, and one of the several Halifax losses that night was that of J.A. Stutter, that the aircraft crashed near Hottenheim on the north bank of the Rhine, southwest of Wiesbaden. His death date is listed on this tombstone as the 6th of September, 1943. And when his Halifax went down that night, none of his crew survived, unfortunately. Now he lays rest here with the rest of the men he served with, to be forever remembered. And here is where Flying Officer James Stutter lies in rest next to his crew. James was just in his early 20s when he sacrificed his life. The photograph we're looking at is widely accepted as showing the crew of Halifax JD 210 with Happy Valley Sally. These are the men that he trained with, flew with, and died with. And now all of them lie together here next to him in row 7, section C, grave 23 in Dürnbach, Germany. And now we're heading to our next individual, that of Pilot Officer George Henry Rich. Now, Henry Rich was originally born in Montreal, later moved to San Francisco. So he's one of the Canadian-born Americans who is buried here in Dürnbach. As for his motivations for joining the Royal Canadian Air Force, I wasn't able to find any, but one can speculate that he felt the connection to his country of birth and wanted to fight among his comrades before the United States joined the war. So right now I'm standing in front of the grave of Pilot Officer George Henry Rich. And I mentioned in my last Dürnbach video that some of the stones are placed closer together while others are more spaced out. And the reason for that being is sometimes when these planes went down, they went down with such impact and such force that the bodies were so badly burned that they couldn't identify which body belonged to whom. But they knew which crew members served in that aircraft. And that is the case for Pilot Officer George Henry Rich and his crew. George Henry Rich was part of the 431st Iroquois Squadron and flew a Halifax LK 973. And he's here in the collective grave of his crew. Rich flew as an air gunner and is listed as a mid-upper gunner. On the night of the 25th through 26th of November 1943, the 431 Squadron took part in an air raid on Frankfurt. His Halifax, though, failed to return from that operation. Post-war work done by the Commonwealth Grave Commission and the RCAF historians confirmed the loss and brought the crew together here at Dürnbach in this collective grave. Rich was only 24 years old when he was killed. I couldn't find a confirmed crew photo specifically labeled to him with the names. We see that he's here. A Canadian squadron, Canadian-born airmen, family roots in the United States, killed over Germany, and buried here in Bavaria. George Henry Rich is one of those stories that deserves to be remembered and to be told. The last person that I want to talk about today is that of Jack Kenny. See, Jack Kenny came from New York City and joined up with the Royal Canadian Air Force and was attached to the 101st Squadron, which was a RAF unit with Canadian personnel under their strength. It was in this unit that Kenny served and also perished in. Jack Kenny was the son of Joseph and Frances Roy of New York City. He served on the 101st Squadron. What was unusual about it is it had Canadian personnel under its strength. Its Lancasters carried out extra radio equipment and additional special duties with their jobs to jam German night fighter communications. On the night of the 1st of February 1945, his Lancaster took off from Ludford Manga on a raid towards Ludwigshafen. Somewhere near the target area, the aircraft was intercepted and shot down by a German night fighter. Kenny was just 22 years old. After the war, Kenny and the rest of his crew were recovered and buried here together at Dürnbach in a shared grave. Pilot Officer Jack Kenny is in Section 2, Row C. But also in Section 2, Row D, we have the first story that we talked about, that of Flight Sergeant Valkenier. It's interesting, they both are Americans who fought under the maple leaf for Canada. I wonder if they knew each other. The reason why these stories deserve to be told, and it's a common inscription that we'll see on these stones, they sacrificed their tomorrow for our today. And that's something we should always remember and never forget. Because once our grandmother's generations die out and our generation starts to fade out, these stories might be forgotten and they deserve to be forever remembered. Somebody close to me recently asked me, why do I go to these war graveyards and tell the stories of different individuals? And I responded with, because their lives matter and their stories deserve to be told. So this is a little bit out of the scope of today's video, but I'm accompanied by my friend Steven here, and he's a fellow from England and he's never been to any war graves before. And I want to ask him what his first impressions were.
Coming here was not what I expected. The idea of going to a war memorial, the idea in itself is a little bit morbid, if we're being honest. But actually that's not been my experience at all. Since we got here and the groundskeeper was kind enough to give us a tour and tell us a lot of the stories about this place, including the families of the people who have been to see loved ones or relatives here. You learn about their lives. I think one of the most common misconceptions about these memorials is that they're about death. But what I've learned today is that it's more about life. We're just talking about their stories, talking about the stories that the groundskeeper has learned from the relatives. You could talk for hours and hours and hours. In fact, it would take several days to cover every person here. And just to give a glimpse of the life that they had, just to give a glimpse of what they did in the military. Some of these people were very funny. They were very cheeky. They were known by their friends and their family. But I'm leaving here today thinking about life, thinking about their lives. And that's why I think everybody should take the time to visit places like this.